SaySomething. It's like a podcast, but it's a vodcast, so you can listen and watch. It's like news talk or sports talk, but it's life talk, so we can walk the road together. On today's episode, Bobby Rodriguez stops by to chat about his Surrendered Wellness program, as well as the fine line between fitness and health, from a physical as well as a spiritual perspective. Thanks for joining the conversation. Here we go. I was recently with a friend of mine whose daughter is involved in competitive athletics. And her body shape is one that's just naturally, maybe not waifishly thin. And so here comes this very fine line as a mother with a teenage daughter who wants to be good at something, and she's bumping up against the fine line of fitness versus health, okay?
Yes.
So welcome to our discussion and topic today, fitness versus health, because just a little bit of my research for my book, I'm happy for you, sort of, not really. Absolutely, a big portion of that had to do with outward appearance. It's just,
yes.
And what was so interesting to me is that it affects men as much as it does women, okay? And so here are little stats to start it out. If you think it's not true, the Dove Beauty Sketches, which has done such a great effort, and what do they call it? It's like
it's like a natural you kind of thing, and it's loving you right where you are.
It really is. So they've had over 64 million views. Just on that, the Body Evolution, 17 million views. The Body Image, it concerns more men than women, which was reported by The Guardian, and it sort of depends on what part of the world you live in. So, and what day and age, which I find interesting too. And this is why I want to talk to y'all, because the whole issue of your body, it changes. And it used to maybe be from decade to decade. Now it may be from every year to every year.
Oh my gosh, with technology from day to day.
Yes.
With all the social media and everything.
Well, and it's everything. So this is my friend Bobby Rodriguez, okay? And he's very, very much into wellness and...
Yeah, and so that's kind of the angle that I come at this particular topic with. I didn't become a believer until I was 33 years old. And so I spent 33 years of my life being an active person with active parents who taught me to be active. But the reason behind my activity was strictly about getting girls. If I'm perfectly honest with you, I wanted to look as good as I could because I thought that would give me some sort of advantage with being able to woo girls. So what happened was I became a believer at 33. My priorities changed, and that drive to be working out and be fit sort of fell off of me a little bit because I was so engaged with learning about God's Word and fellowshipping with His people and connecting that it didn't even think about it. Right.
But it's interesting to me that before it was very much consumed with self and how you looked. Yeah. And then it sounds like, and maybe partly because you were in the ministry.
A little bit, yeah.
But
that didn't come back until just a little bit later.
Yeah.
I mean, that didn't happen until a little bit later into the process. But if we look at the percentage of time that I spent on that topic, I might be in the gym 2.5 hours a day. And doing different things, different ways of working out, but spending that time. So a good bit of my waking hours, free waking hours, were spent trying to look as good as I could.
Yeah.
Right?
And then the other time when you were not in the gym, you were thinking about
probably
how
so.
You could,
Where are the girls now that I could use this newfound fitness that I've given
I was going to
myself?
ask, how many, did you log the difference of how many times you looked in the mirror?
Oh my.
Gosh, yeah.
Right?
So as a believer, I would even say today, if I'm going to be perfectly vulnerable with you here, I still struggle with how, as I walk past, going into work, there's a plate glass wall. And do I focus on myself as I walk through this? Because so it's not the right motivation, but there could be someone on the other side of that glass wall looking at me, look at myself, right?
Yeah.
So I do my best to just walk right through that.
It's killing you.
So it happens all the time, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
How do we help our children with their self-image?
Or ourselves.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just saying that, yes, I love the fact that it began with a teenager because it's brutal. But also it's like, I don't know. It's sort of like put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you try and help the others. And is it something that's coming out of my mouth? Is it something that's coming out of my actions? Is it something that I don't even know I'm doing because I was groomed to do that?
That's right.
And it's interesting because it can play out in so many areas of life. Because yes, it's fitness. And I love that you said it made you think about yourself, because therein I think lies the problem, is that it allows us to define our self-worth based on me, looking at me, and then a little more me, which tends to be the trip up over here.
Yeah.
So how do you, so tell us a little bit about your program that you came up with.
Yeah, so let me go back just a little bit to this idea of what happened when I became a believer.
Okay.
So this drive to be fit sort of fell off of me because I was engaging in other things. And then fast forward a few years, and I find myself in the end of my first year of marriage. Our daughter is coming, and I look in the mirror, maybe for the first time in a while, right? And I see that I go from a consistent, most of my adult life, about 185 pounds to 215 pounds. And it wasn't in the right direction that I would have thought it needed to be back in the day, right? So I put on a ton of weight, and I thought, man, something's not right here. I know that I shouldn't be doing the workouts for the wrong reasons, but I'm not stewarding my body in a way that's honoring and glorifying to God.
Yeah.
Now, that was really a long way in the future for me to really get that, but I think that was the beginning of this idea of like, I'm not a great example for my kids right now. My daughter who's coming is going to see a father who's not necessarily lazy, but not capable as capable as he could be to do the ministry that God would have him do. So fast forward again, and I found this sort of group fitness program that I loved, and it was engaging, and we were all kind of suffering together.
That was great.
That's
suffering
right?
to have people to suffer with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does it have a C and an F in it?
It does, right? And so,
as in CrossFit.
yes, that's
it
what I
is
found.
so fun though. But you're traveling the road together, which is great.
Yes.
So it's not all bad.
The crazy thing about CrossFit, and I hesitate to say the name because the methodology is not the important thing here.
Take the name
out, and we can insert yoga or cycling or whatever it is, walking, whatever you want to do, right? But I found in this group environment that everything you would want in the Christian life, in the Christian community was there.
Yeah.
So there was like this fellowship and time spent together, encouragement of one another, holding each other accountable, except at the center of all of that was what I used to be focused on, which was self, or this idea of fitness, of being as fit as you can. And there was no Jesus involved in that at all. So I thought, man, maybe the Lord wants me to be here, to be a light in this dark place while I figure out how to steward my own body. And I love CrossFit because it has some very foundational fitness principles that are easy to follow and measurable and quantifiable, which I really, really like.
Yeah. I think it's fun finding the challenge of what your body can do.
Yes.
And I think we can take that same love and apply it to other areas of our life. And when I'm jogging, for example, I push myself, don't quit. And, and that can be applied in other areas. Absolutely. Also, when a person is working out, they're looking at transforming in some area. So why not take that physical transformation into something a little bit deeper?
Absolutely.
That's a good word. I like that.
So our program you were talking about. So what I found was that, so here are these people who they're not expected to really follow Christ. They don't have a relationship with Jesus. And I was trying to insert Christ into that environment. But then I would spend my Sundays at church working. And if we go to a church that has a balcony, you can kind of see everybody coming in. And if I took a counter, right, and just looked at people walking in the door and based it on their body mass index, which is a really kind of like rudimentary scale of someone's obesity, right? It's not accurate in some cases, but as a general rule, it's a good way to say, is this population overweight? Are they in danger of having health effects from their weight? And if I took a clicker and I just clicked people that were past this BMI scale that we might see, in the church, what you're going to find is it's probably a bit higher than it is in what we would say the world, people who aren't following God. And I have a theory about why that is. It's because the world sees fitness and wellness in this light of I'm doing it for me.
Right.
And there's this intrinsic motivation that says I got to look better, or I want to have this vain attempt at extending my life by being well, by being fit. And so we don't have that in the church. In fact, in the church, we'll say, hey, if you are struggling with an eating disorder, if you're a guy and maybe you're looking at some things on the internet that you shouldn't be, don't do that. Don't do that. But if you want to go home and watch The Biggest Loser and eat a pound of ice cream while you watch The Biggest Loser, we're okay with that. Just don't look at pornography and stop doing whatever it is you're doing for an eating disorder. Yeah. So we're not pushing people in this one very narrow area of stewardship. And that's what I see this wellness program that we do at our church as being, it's about stewarding your body for God's glory. Now there's a ton of other little things that we can pull from that. Stewarding your body, which for God's glory, which speaks to this young lady, right? This one that kind of starts the whole conversation. I have a very, very good friend. Her name is Becca Nail. And she's a girl who self-admittedly is larger than other girls, right? She might be this kind of girl where she's fit and she's very capable.
Right.
But God created her with quads that can squat 250 pounds, but she's not going to be the waif-thin girl that, and nor could she be, right? Nor could she be. And if you should have her here sometime, but to hear her story and talk about how God revealed this kind of idea to her that stewarding the body that God gave her for His glory and doing the most that she can with that particular body is going to be the way that she's going to worship God with this wellness idea. So that was one of the best things for me, is to see, hey, where we start with what God has given us, and then we take that and give it the optimal amount of working out and diet or whatever, so that we can steward that particular resource for His glory, not our own kind of lifting ourselves up or trying to be the best person that we can for us, but doing it for God's glory. And man, it's revolutionized my thinking about that, as well as I think others that have kind of gone through our little program.
I love the tie back to that. And I've got a 10-year-old daughter who is built much like her mama. And I was a competitive swimmer, never wafy thin, always tall, bigger. In fact, my elementary school pictures, back row, center of the entire
you were
class.
Probably never on the back row.
There was Erin.
No, not true.
Yeah, because I was always a back row, like a head taller, especially in third grade or younger. It was
growing up. And I remember always being so self-conscious about that. And now here I sit as a mother with a 10-year-old daughter who has my genetics and looks a lot like me. And she has other girls who are that, wafy, thin build, who are asking her and pressing into her, hey, I think you might be fat. Do you think you're fat? And she's only 10. And by the way, this has been going on for a couple of years. And she's not. She really isn't. She's just a bigger build. And she's very healthy. And so one thing that I've tried to do to try to help her walk through that is, I'll ask her a series of questions that ultimately ends up with, do you think that God makes mistakes? And ultimately she'll say, well, no. And I'll say, you're right. And so he thought about you and created you down to every single detail of what you look like, every hair on your head, how tall you're going to be, the color of your eyes, the shade of your skin, everything. He thought through all of that. And so, at some point in time, if you could just sit with that with a trust that God did not make a mistake with you, just as He didn't make a mistake with anything else, let's start there and try to build from there. It's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
But it's hard.
That's the problem. And I think that where we have to change as a society and hopefully us as the church innovating this path of understanding that the standard that we're trying to all achieve is not about how you look in relation to everyone else. It's about you stewarding your body for God's
Okay,
glory.
which goes back to a theme that has been consistent with almost every subject that we're diving into, and that is identity. Okay, and self-worth. Where are you driving your? What is your
Yes.
identity, and where are you getting your self-worth from? And what I love about what you're doing is that it's the meat on the bones of actually following through, because it's tricky. Because when you do enter into an exercise regime or a program, it is very hard not to think about it.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
that's part of why I wanted Erin here too, because I think she's found a lot of freedom, and I think that Brenda has too.
I'm wrestling with this whole conversation because I'm trying to figure out where do we fall with all this. Thinking about my son, who at one point in elementary school was what he considered chunky, but he was not. He always ate well, and so I was not worried about him being overweight. He was always in that top percentile.
Right.
But this went to this and muscles.
Right.
But he was faithful where he was when he was looking in the mirror and saying, there is something wrong with me because I don't look like the other guys.
Yes, and there goes the whole thing.
Yeah.
But-
which comparison is the problem.
But here's the thing. This is where I'm struggling. Do you look at that image in the mirror and say, well, I'm not what everybody else is, so why not eat the extra dessert?
Oh, that's
You see what I'm
interesting.
saying?
Yeah, because you can go either way. Why not eat the extra dessert?
Because-
or why not eat nothing?
Exactly
I'm telling
right.
you, and there goes. It's like, but where am I defining? Am I allowing my surroundings to define who I am?
Right.
It's it's the fine line, Bobby.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, whoa, these are brutal
But
waters.
don't you think that goes back to what Bobby said about there also is, especially as followers of Christ, there's a stewardship of our body. And I think
That's
that's what helps
that's where the
bring
freedom
the
comes.
balance
It's like if
where
you can-
where it's not about us.
Yes.
And it's not about a size or a number on the scale or all those things that we can manufacture to measure our self-worth.
Yeah, right.
But instead it's saying God gave me this body.
Right.
He gave me this body to live out a life on earth, to do the purposes for which he created me. And so how do I steward this in the best way that I can have the highest amount of energy, where I can feel the
Right.
best, where I can communicate the best, where I can
Okay.
think the clearest?
Yeah.
That to me is what it's all about.
And,
Yes.
and it spreads out into everything, even like, so we want to like push kids into athletics and stuff, but some kids are given the gift of athletics.
Absolutely.
If Steph Curry didn't steward the gift of his athleticism, we wouldn't have the kind of example that we have.
Oh, you're so sweet.
I love the collective sigh.
Because in my mind, I'm seeing Steffi Graf.
No,
but
no,
I know
very
that's
good.
not
Very
the
good.
same.
It's a
Very
man,
good.
first
It's
of
a
all.
man.
Let's
Okay.
start there.
Yeah. Basketball
Is it
player. Look him
okay.
up. You'll love it. It's a great story.
He's
It's a great
great.
story.
Yeah.
Great story.
Yeah.
He and his wife both.
But exactly, and if we aren't doing that, if we aren't taking these gifts that God has given us, and then looking to glorify Him with them, I think that's where we're kind of getting off track. And I love this
Exactly.
idea that the option between do I eat the extra dessert or do I not eat it at all? It all can go back to 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink, whatever you do it all for the glory of God. So that talks about eating and drinking, right? And in a different context than wellness, but at the principle is still there.
Yeah.
So the choice here, either one of those could possibly be the wrong choice, probably is the wrong choice, and the choice that honors God is to do something else. And we need to look at our heart. What's going on as I make this decision,
Yeah.
and how can I give this over to the Lord so that He might be glorified in how I interact here?
Okay, so this goes to the bigger person, I think. Doing well with what you have today, even though it may not look good to you, and just watch the outcome. And so for that person who is feeling despair in any area of their life, it might not look good today, but do well with what you have, because I go back to my beginning word, transformation is taking place, but you can't see it in the moment. It takes someone
It's a
else to
process.
come along to say, wow, there's something different. Even if you've looked at yourself in the mirror every day, as you were going through your weightlifting and everything, you didn't see the muscles come about the same day you lifted the weights.
Sure not.
But a month later, oh my gosh, I'm a stud. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So again, when you're looking at the whole person, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, it's a journey.
In practical ways, give us a few practical tips. Like even when your mind starts to, as you walk by that glass and are tempted to get, your eyes anchored on yourself, what are some practical tips that people can go through, especially people that want freedom, but aren't quite sure how to start?
Yeah. So I want to, one real quick thing before we go there for practical tips, is that the results that we all want are those kind of look at myself in the mirror, can I run farther or faster, those kinds of things. If we're looking to surrender our wellness, give over our fitness to God, if you will, the work that we do to get ourselves right with that, about stewarding my body for God's glory, and that I eat in a certain way that's going to be honoring to God, and it's a consistent sort of drudge sometimes, but it's a consistent thing. The ancillary benefits to that stewardship for God's glory is the things that you kind of want when you're looking for it for yourself.
Right? Which is beautiful.
Right. And
it's
so,
probably freer. Like you have so much more freedom to enjoy it and feel better.
Yes. And then you're not stuck on that sort of like, well, look what I did.
Right.
It's just, I'm doing this for God's glory, yet my tush gets a little bit smaller and I can run a little bit faster.
Win-win.
Right.
Depending upon what you like.
Exactly, yes. Right. So practical ways. I think the most practical way to steward your body for God's glory is really about what goes in your mouth.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you look at any book, you can go to Dr. Cooper's books from the Cooper Clinic. They're going to talk about diet being 90% of kind of your weight loss or whatever it might be. Even athletic performance, if that's what you're looking for from a wellness standpoint, is about diet. So when it comes to me about thinking about what I'm going to put in my body, I just have to make constant choices. And sometimes the right choice for me is to sit with my son and eat a cookie. I have this great little example where one day my wife makes the best chocolate chip cookies.
Only one day?
Well,
she
makes them
it.
often,
I'm just kidding.
So one day she did make them, though, and they were laid out. They were
I'm
warm.
Coming over.
So good. Anytime you want. She'll love having you there. They were laid out on the counter, and I had come in from outside, and I saw the cookies, and I thought, I'm not hungry. I don't necessarily need to have that cookie, but I know what it would taste like, but I don't need that cookie. So I'm going to choose in this moment right now to walk past the cookies and not have one because it's just not necessary for me. So fast forward a couple of minutes, and my son walks in, and we happen to converge in the kitchen, and he sees the cookies, and he goes, Dad, did you see the cookies? And I said, I know, buddy. And he's like, can we have one? And I said, yeah, let's split a cookie, Miller. And so I split the cookie. He ate one, and he ate half, and I ate half. Had I not eaten the cookie with my son in that moment, and it's so great that happened all in that same little 10-minute span of time.
Yeah, that's good.
I was stewarding my body for God's glory and in what I was putting in my mouth. And then I was having a moment with my son where we were enjoying what his mother created for our family.
Yes.
And we got a little memory or a little moment in that. And that's what I think this constant measuring, that 1 Corinthians 10:31 of every time I stop. Oh, can't that get to be really monotonous or sometimes legalistic? Yes. And in doing so, measure your heart. And if you're being legalistic, let's pull back. Let's think about that. But it's training your mind and your heart to submit every choice over to the Lord. Yeah. That's the practical thing. So it might look like, I don't really want to go running today. Well, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should, right? But what is the Lord kind of giving you in that moment for that? Mm-hmm. That's it's not the little bitty things. I could give you 1,000 different examples. It's this consistent measuring of your heart when you're going to make these choices.
That's such a good word.
Yeah, very good.
All right.
So 2 thoughts. One, the health. World Health Organization defines being in good health as not just being free of disease, but being well physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. So it kind of goes right to what you're saying.
Well, if it's true, and this is one thing about God's truth, if it's true everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so it's not a surprise that the World Health Organization would say that.
That's right. Thought. And the second thought I had was, going back to my now 17-year-old, he looks back on that time when he was not proportionate to the other guys, and he says, I don't want to see that. That's a terrible time in my life, and I don't want to remember it. And I remind him, if you weren't that, then you couldn't have become who you
Right.
are today. So you've got to embrace all of it, because it all goes into you being good physically, emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so oxygen mask on yourself first.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Really, to get
Yeah,
your mind.
yeah.
And then the beauty of being able to encourage those that are around you, which goes to the whole idea of say something. Say
Right.
something encouraging. And I do find that even, and we were talking about this earlier, just the use of senses. The more senses you use in doing anything, the higher likelihood that you will retain it. And so even as it's going into me, to be able to say it to one of my kids throughout the day or anything, I get to hear it too. And 9 times out of 10, it's encouraging me. I needed to hear it as much as they did. And often they're not listening, so what difference does it make anyway? Because we're in the teen world
Yeah.
where it's like the Charlie Brown teacher, wah, 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 is me. But I need to hear it. And so I love what you had to say. I hope it's encouraging to people. We'd love for you to come back, because this is a topic in a good way that never goes away. And I think it is like faith. It's never going to go away because it forces us to surrender and rest. And that's actually a good thing. So it's not, I know we feel like it's drudgery, and I don't know why we feel like it's drudgery. Is that a trick of the world to go, yeah, this is a burden instead of a blessing?
Right.
Because it actually, if you just twist it a tiny bit, it is a blessing.
Absolutely.
Because I can't do it on my own, and I'm not required
Absolutely.
to do it on my own. Doing it on my own actually is a prison. So thank you for your tidbits of freedom. What else have you got for us? Anything?
I think that's it. I think maybe you do a whole other show on that, what you just talked about, the idea of rest, which is another thing our society doesn't do well.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big
for
conversation.
sure.
Yes.
For sure.
Do you want to do that?
We can do it anytime we want. That'd be
Okay.
great.
I love that. It's so funny because Ariana Huffington was just in town last week. She just wrote a book. Sleep is her deal. Do you know that?
No, I didn't.
She's so frustrated with the fact that people are not sleeping and what it's doing to physically. I mean, it is her mantra. And she runs the Huffington Post, and I don't know if you know who she is, but it really is her mission. It is her mission to spread the word about sleep.
That's easily a whole nother
Well,
conversation.
and it's so interesting, even as we talk about health as a whole, two things that I've experienced recently is the realization of rest and how much sleep is important to your overall health, and even your weight and your whole physical composition. And also just drinking water has a massive effect. And those are two really simple, easy fixes. But they have a huge effect on our overall health.
And so one last little thing too, and I wanted to say this, was that you were saying, hey, how I can just recite this to my children and then I'll hear it as well. So we're in this position right now where I think we're on the forefront of something in the Christian world and in the world in general, where we don't have a good understanding. There's been so much has been thrown at us, from like the Thigh Master to the South Beach diet or whatever it might be.
I remember the Jane Fonda videos when I was a kid.
There's so much that we have to go back and undo. All of us are in a position, myself included, where I don't necessarily get it yet. But this idea of consistently chasing after God's glory in this area of stewardship of our bodies, we can help lay the foundation for my children and my children's children to steward their bodies naturally, so that it's not going against what I've been taught for my entire life.
Yeah, that's a good word. So interesting.
Yeah.
May freedom abound.
There you go.
And we'd like to thank our fake sponsor, that is not water, but Keurig coffee, which I think is special. Usually Susie Cakes has been our fake sponsor, and they are delicious. Have you had a Susie
I
Cake?
have yet to have one, but I will.
There's a lot of butter in there, and it's good
Butter's
butter.
good, guys.
And there's
It's
just
good.
no self-control at all. when it
There
comes
is
to
too.
self-care.
They have mini Susie Cakes.
Hey, how do we finish a wellness?
Right?
I know,
But truly, it is all